Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Let's start off with misery porn and outrage. Sunday night misery porn and outrage got married on CBS as Meghan Markle and Oprah and the Henry, Harvey, Prince, whatever, had their big powwow. 17.1 million people tuned in to see how horrible it was for poor little Meghan there at the palace. As I said when I turned it off, I regret having sat through it. Don't really care about rich people and their problems. There are people in this country who are hungry. There are people who in this country are unemployed. There are people around the world who are starving to death. Don't really care. Not even a little bit. But hey, we as Americans did. The largest non-sporting audience of 2021. This was big seller. And it's all about, hey, you know, those royals. They're racists. Yeah, so, yeah, and? You didn't know that before? That was the big bombshell. Everyone knew that would be the lead. For me, the important part of what Miss Meghan Markle had to say, she said at one point talking about that she was suicidal. She wasn't doing well. She was struggling. Nobody was helping her. She said that in her last job, at my old job, she said there was a union and they would protect me. Well, the royal family did not. The union would have protected her. So I'm like, you know, why didn't you stay and start the Royals Union? You could have unionized the Duchess and Dukes and all the other titles that I actually don't know. And, you know, you maybe you'd have gotten somewhere with that. For me, that was the important part. The rest of it, sorry, I don't have time, because here's the thing. I watched the 60 Minutes special before that, because how it happened is I'm watching 60 Minutes and it just flowed into Oprah. And I generally turn that stuff off because it's meant to anger you. It's meant to outrage you. It's meant to show other people's misery so you feel better about yourself. And well, I don't have it so bad. Look how bad poor Meghan had it. Aw. $32 million wedding. Or I'm sorry, 32 million euro wedding. What's that, about $45 million in US? Giant wedding. Every need met. During the 60 Minutes part, they talked about Columbus, Ohio. Food bank there, struggling to get food into people's into their lives. They shared stories of one woman who, you know, lost a job, was homeless, living in a tent, pregnant. Terrible, horrible. That's something we should be talking about. That's something 17.1 million people should be watching and being active over. That's something we should be furious about. But no. Tabloid journalism wins again. The question is, you know, how do we solve our real problems? And I know, you spare me the angry emails. She's so hurt. I don't care, not even a little bit. The good thing over the weekend, COVID bill passed. The American Rescue Plan passed 50-49. Kamala Harris did not have to intervene because Alaska Senator Dan Sullivan did not show up. So it was a 50-49 vote. Did some interesting things, did some really good things. $1,400 for everybody. Below, I think it was 80,000 for individuals, 160,000 for couples. Cut off there, no prorating above and beyond. $300 a week on extra unemployment through until September. Ends in September. $3,000 per child tax credit. $3,600, I guess, for kids under 6. $350 billion to help state and local governments who desperately need it. $20 billion to continue fighting and funding this vaccine. fighting the pandemic, get the vaccine distribution, get it out to the people so that we can actually go back to something of a bit of a normal life. $50 billion for small businesses. Devil in the details. Who do we consider small? Sorry, if it's me, sorry, Ayn Rand Center or Institute, you shouldn't get a dime. $130 billion to open up schools and help them redo things, ventilation systems, things that need to be done to help in the reopening. Also, $86 billion to shore up the multi-employer pension funds across the country. About 1.3 million retired workers, truck drivers, construction workers, electricians, 1.3 million people are going to have their pensions secure, not going to see massive cuts. I actually know some people who are really, for the last more than a decade, sweating out the fact that they could see their pensions slashed in half or worse. And this is one of those weird moments for me because I look at this and I know a bunch of people who are huge Trump supporters. They're the ones who tell you to go A, B, C, D, E, your feelings. They're the ones who are giving you that other letter, your feelings. They're the ones who, got the big sign out in front of the house and, Joe Biden's not my president. They're going to have to live with the fact that Joe Biden and the horrible, dreaded Democrats are the ones who saved their behinds. Because not one Republican in the Senate voted to move that piece of legislation. Not one. And Trump was never going to sign that. Trump was never going to move the Butch-Lewis Act. Never. So for all my union buddies, all my union brothers and sisters out there who voted for Trump and I hate Joe Biden, he just saved your pensions. All of them. Because this is going to shore up the multi-employer system for a long while. This is a good thing. And it was Joe Biden and the Democrats. So remember that. Also, we're going to find out on Thursday. Joe Biden's going to give his first, yes, very first, primetime address to the nation. The year anniversary of all the shutdowns. He's going to talk about the losses people have had, the sacrifices people have made, and more efforts on what we're doing to whoop the virus and to return to some bit of normal and get us going in the right direction. Some good news also over the weekend. The CDC is saying, hey, if you got the vaccine, you can go back to the restaurants. You can go back to hugging your grandmother. You can go back to some bit of normalcy. They're saying that you're going to be good. Now, I'm saying, for me, for a while, because I go back to my personal physician, who told me 6 months after they say it's okay, like they're saying right now, he's going to still be wearing the mask, and so am I. So for the next 6 months, in these social settings, you're going to see me with my Teamster mask on. I will have the dreaded black mask because still, we got to get everybody on board and it down the road. Now, there are people who are ready to chuck the masks right now. I look out in Idaho, at their state capital, over the weekend. They had a mask burning event. Yes, they brought out the children. And the children were there to put their masks ceremoniously into the burn barrel. Yes, they were going to put it in the burn barrel. Interesting thing about Idaho. Idaho was one of the states that had no mask mandate. This is the weird kind of thing. This is one of those bizarre things. It's like having a book burning for people who don't read. I mean, this is that kind of thing. Now, these are the people who burn books. Yes, absolutely. But it's really just really twisted. But they had their big ceremony. They came out. They did the burn barrel thing. Now, evidently, the Idaho State Police not happy because evidently open burn barrels in Idaho, in the state capital, not legal. So I'm wondering if someone's going to go to jail for it because they had a permit for the rally. And it's one of those things where you're having a burn the mask rally. maybe you should have got a burn the mask permit for burning something, which nobody was going to give you. But they had their little ceremony. They burned the barrels. The interesting thing for me, though, is as I was reading the articles about it, one of the spokespeople was a state representative, and they talked about her and her, we're gonna go and we're gonna reclaim our freedom. Remember, they didn't have a mask mandate. What freedom are they reclaiming? There was nothing taken. There was nothing there. So they're having this political stunt, just, I guess, to get some news. But what I found really interesting, and this is, again, another one of those moments of following the money. This Dorothy Moon, who is a state representative in Idaho, her husband evidently serves on the National Council, I'll get it, for the John Birch Society. So you start going, oh, now I get it. The money. The John Birchers, for those who don't know, were the anti-tax people back from the 50s. They have been behind virtually every bad idea that our country's pursued for the last 50, 60, I guess 70 years now. They're getting up there in age, they are. But they've been behind this. Now, I'll tell you, as I was watching the kids do their burning, because they had some video, I got to watch the kids doing the mask burning. I couldn't help but think, because I got to assume they're all homeschooled. I gotta wonder if for a well-rounded education that the parents, because look, if I were homeschooling, I would want my kids to have a well-rounded education. I gotta wonder if the parents then took the kids down to the morgue to look at the bodies of the people who didn't wear a mask and died, because at least 1,800 people in Idaho have died from the virus. They've had more than 173,000 cases. Their ICUs were packed for a while. I'm wondering if they were going to go and do that. If they were going to go and say, hey, we're going to show you both sides of the coin, or no? Was it just, hey, we got the kids and we're going to prop them up and we're going to put them in for the burning, in for the good old fashioned ceremony of burning the masks. Crazy stuff. Also, Joe Biden yesterday, Sunday, Bloody Sunday, he signed an executive order that would promote getting access for people to vote. I thought it was an interesting day, the 56th anniversary of Sunday, Bloody Sunday, helping military people who live overseas, Native Americans, people with disabilities, helping them to vote. I'll be honest, is a good thing. They're going to use their social media. They're going to use their website. They're going to spend some money to modernize vote.gov, which I think is a really important thing to do. But helping people to learn to vote and get access to it, good thing. I find it interesting that today you see the governor of Iowa. Here it comes. With one hand, you have Joe Biden and the Democrats going, no, we need to expand voting. On the other side, we are going to have the Republicans going, no, can't have that. Our power goes up as well, yours goes down. Kim Reynolds signed the Republican-backed bill that's going to make it harder to vote early. Now, what's interesting about Iowa has had no election irregularities. Nothing. There's nothing there. Now, understand, I get it. I get the talking points from the Republican Party is early voting bad. Encouraging people to vote really bad, and especially those people voting even worse. Iowa had record turnout because of the mail-in voting, because of the early voting, and they want to stop that. And Iowa won most of their elections. I mean, that's the weird part of this, which then brings us to Georgia. Yeah, Georgia, because Georgia's really going crazy right now. They lost in November, lost in January. It's now time to go back to Jim Crow. And today the legislature approved a bill that's going to repeal the no excuse absentee voting. So of the 1.3 million votes that were cast by mail in 2020, 450,000 of them were Republican votes. So is this one of those moments where you go, you're biting off your nose in spite of your face? Maybe. They're also going after automatic voter registration, something that they implemented back in 2016. And in fact, of the 7.6 million voters in the state, 5 million of them were registered through the automatic process. Also, there's a nice piece of legislation going through to end voting on the weekends, before early voting on the weekends, because the African American churches do the souls to polls things on Sundays. Can't have that. Bad for Republicans, because they're really chafed over the fact that they lost both of those Senate seats in January. And look, we're seeing this across the country, aren't we? Republican legislators have introduced 253 pieces of legislation in 43 states to restrict voting rights. So you got to ask yourself the simple question: why is it that they're trying to continually restrict our ability to exercise the franchise, while Democrats are trying to increasingly let people vote? Which side would you find yourself on? And this is one of those weird moments for me, because I'm somebody who wants everybody to vote. I don't care which side wins or loses, simply because I'm tired of everybody complaining, and most of the people I know don't vote. So if everyone votes, you can then complain, make yourself happy, whine, all of that. But this idea that we're going to continually stop people from voting is crazy. It just is. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, I got to tell you, I'm thrilled by the fact that we got this COVID bill passed through. And some of the things in there are really, really important, as I pointed out a second ago. But this is one of those moments where I've got some folks on the left, complaining that it wasn't enough. This was a huge, massive win. This was an enormous piece of legislation that's going to help people. And understand, not one Republican voted for it. Not even Lisa Murkowski. And understand, Lisa Murkowski, for all of the Republicans whining and complaining that they weren't listened to, she actually got something. She got something put in the legislation, and then she voted against it. So think about this. I mean, during the break, think about the fact that not a single Republican voted to give families a shot, to help communities make it through this pandemic. Yet, every single Republican in the Senate voted for that Tax Cut and Jobs Act that made the wealthy wealthier. I guess it comes back to the old labor frame. Which side are you on? And I don't think it's hard to tell. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2007. That was the day 7,000 workers at Northrop Grumman, a shipyard company in Pascagoula, Mississippi, went out on strike. Grumman is one of the largest defense contractors in the world. The workers were members of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 733, and the Pascagoula Metal Trades Council. They were still reeling from the ravages of Hurricane Katrina just 2 years earlier. The hurricane had devastated the Mississippi Gulf Coast and sent prices for housing skyrocketing. But while workers suffered, Katrina brought $3 billion in federal contracts to Northrop Grumman to repair hurricane damage. Despite this, Grumman proposed a 4-year contract for the workers with no raises and increased healthcare costs. For many workers, this did not sit well. They knew the company had received massive government contracts, but still was not willing to treat workers fairly at the bargaining table. The union members rejected the offer and voted to strike. The company came back with a proposal offering small raises, which did not keep pace with the cost of living. The strike was called. For 4 weeks, workers marched and manned the picket lines. During the strike, the company cut off the workers' health care coverage. The company then offered slightly higher wages and reduced the increases to health care coverage. Although the proposal was not enough to keep up with the soaring local cost of living, union members voted to end the strike and accept the offer.
Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God is going to trouble these waters.
Labor History in 2, brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Quick shout out to the leadership at Teamsters Local 776 in Harrisburg. Listeners sent me a photo of their truck delivering a truckload of water down to the folks in Dallas after the big freeze. According to the person who sent me the story, they sent down 2 union stewards from ABF, Chalmer Edgen and Gary Teeter. They drove the Teamsters rig down during the freeze, and good on them. And look, not surprisingly, I didn't see that in the news anywhere. The local news didn't pick that up, probably because they didn't tell them, because they never do. But I'm going to give them some credit, and I appreciate the letting me know about that. But here again, good stuff on the COVID relief bill, good stuff on the American Rescue Plan, and for me, as I said, a big part of it is helping those retirees and shoring up that multi-employer pension funds. And here to share some thoughts on, how that got in, why it's so important, I've asked John Murphy to come talk with us. John's an international vice president at large with the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. John, thanks for taking time for us.
It's my pleasure to be here, Rick.
So this is something that I have been working on and talking about for well over a decade. I go back, it got to be at least 10, 12 years when I had Bob Casey on talking about we need to shore up multi-employer pension funds. It's finally in here.
That's right. It's been a long road to get some kind of legislative relief from the multi-employer union pension system, but we finally did it. There's one more step to go, but it should be fairly easy. The House needs to vote on the Senate version of the COVID-19 relief package, that may happen tomorrow or Wednesday. In that package is the Butch-Lewis Emergency Pension Plan Relief Act of 2021. And what this bill will do, Rick, it will provide enough financial assistance to the critical and declining pension plans and the critical plans to pay 100% of pension benefits over the next 30 years and keep it solvent at the end of that period. So it's an incredible piece of legislation. It really will lift huge anxiety off the shoulders of retirees and their spouses, and give them some peace of mind, so they can enjoy their golden years. So it really is a fantastic bill.
No, it is. And for me, I had someone ask me about it. I said, it's really a big anti-poverty program, because if you go and you do what has been talked about and slashing retirees' pensions, people who are retired now, you go and you start talking about slashing 50-60% of what they're living on now, you're immediately putting those people into some level of poverty and making their lives worse, and probably having to force many of them back to taking low-wage jobs that would make them exploitable. So for me, this is a smart piece of legislation, but it's also a compassionate one.
Yes, and it really recognizes the importance of making sure that retirees, elderly, can live out their lives in comfort. It's been said that if the multi-employer pension system was allowed to collapse, the next step in this war on middle-class working Americans would be to start reducing Social Security benefits. And so by coming up with this relief package, there's a real message out there to the country that protecting the retirement security of all Americans is a paramount issue for the Democratic Party.
No, and that's important to point out, because I don't believe Donald Trump was ever going to sign this, and I know the Republicans were never going to move this. I know there was some toying around with maybe Trump would sign it. They were never going to do it. And the weird thing, the thing that's interesting to me is I know a lot of Trump supporters who were going to be harmed when these pensions got cut. So I find it interesting that they're now going to have to live with the reality that it was Joe Biden, who they despise, and the Democrats who saved their behinds.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly, Rick. I can tell you that there were 3 times in the last 18 months leading up to December 2020 when Trump could have done something and he refused.
Right.
The Republicans, some of them, led retirees to believe that they were sympathetic and they wanted to help. But every time they had a chance to do something, help break the logjam, they declined. So that's why the Democrats made a decision. The leadership of the Democratic Party, they were going to put a pension relief bill in the COVID-19 package because they knew that this would be their only chance of getting it passed. So the intransience of the Republican Party, we finally have overcome it.
No, and that's a good thing. I mean, but what do you say to the person, John, who goes, well, you bailed these guys out. What about the future? Is this going to shore up the multi-employer system on into the future? Given the fact that the numbers of people who are in these union funds are dwindling, is this going to shore this up till the end? How do you see this playing out?
Yeah, yes, it will. By funding the pension benefits through 2051, those pension plans that were in trouble at the end of that period are going to be in a much better financial position because they will not have drained all their assets. They can actually use their assets to prudently to gain investment income during that period. So they'll be in a better point.
They'll be in a better place long term. But because here's my problem. I look at these multi-employer defined benefit pension funds, which are going away. I mean, they're the dinosaur in today's society because we've been forced to live with these defined contribution plans. And for me, the what destroyed these funds was a couple of things. One, the dwindling number of members because of the constant attacks on organized labor, which is why we need something like the PRO Act to get more people to join and form unions. But more importantly, it was the fact that employers started pushing for these defined contribution plans that allowed them to get away from the responsibility of ensuring their workers have retirement security.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. As you know, Rick, the economy in this country has never been kind to middle-class American workers. Most of them are raising kids, and they find it very difficult to save. And so the false lure of a defined contribution plan where workers fund their future retirement by taking wages and put it into these defined contribution plan. Most workers can't afford to take sizable amounts of their weekly pay and put it into it. So therefore, these defined contribution plans really won't provide enough money for American workers. And you're absolutely right. The decline of the labor movement since the end of World War II is one of the main reasons why our pension plans have declined. You add in adverse court rulings taking away the weapons that unions pioneered, like sit-down strikes, intermittent strikes, all of which the courts and the National Labor Relations Board have declared to be illegal. Those kinds of weapons that they took away from us, including secondary boycotts, have led to the decline of labor. So we have less people in private sector labor unions today than we've ever had before, even though the number of union members roughly is around 13 million to 14 million. Notably, a lot of that is because of public sector union members who are in public sector pension plans. So
right.
bills like the PRO Act, which I'm sure you have briefed your listeners to, will help overcome the laws that make it so difficult for workers to join unions. I want to point out, and I'm sure you've told your listeners also about this, about a week ago, President Joe Biden did a videotape message to American workers, really targeted for the Amazon workers in Alabama, telling them they had a right to join the union. It was their choice. The employer could not interfere or coerce or intimidate them. That statement, which lasted approximately 4 minutes, is an outstanding turning point in labor history. Joe Biden is the most pro-labor president of the United States since FDR. And that election, which is at the ballots will be counted in Alabama at the end of March, will really be a breakthrough. Amazon, Jeff Bezos, is applying every trick in the union busting playbook to try to scare people away. So Joe Biden's statement was absolutely uplifting for those workers.
No, absolutely. And as I said, he's been the most pro-union president of my lifetime, and that video is part of it. Also firing Peter Robb and his number 2 there on day 1 by 5 o'clock in the most unceremonious fashion of an at-will employee. There's the door. Was equally, for me, was one of those high moments. But here's the thing, and this is where I come back to the fact that we need to grow the number of people in unions, because these defined contribution pension plans that have been forced on working people, the average, I read a statistic the other day, the average worker has about $18,000. We've got a retirement crisis that's coming. So the next fight for the labor movement is, while we've shored up the pensions for our members and for people in multi-employer funds, is fighting to make sure that all people have some bit of retirement security and clean up the mess that the last 40 years have saddled us with.
You're absolutely right. A mark of a just society is how it treats the sick, the weak, and the elderly. And retirement security, providing income for our senior citizens, is a hallmark of our way of going toward a just society. It really is an important. I think that over the next decade, as Republicans try to go after Social Security, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the fight for retirement security will be as great as the fight to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour.
No, absolutely. And look, there's the other part of that, $15 and a union. That right. To me is the important part of all of that. Now, let me ask you this. I know you were I think you were organizing director for the Teamsters for a while, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, I know you led the overnight campaign back in the 90s that I did some work on.
Yes.
I'm looking at this PRO Act. In your capacity when you wore the hat as organizing director, would what they're proposing have helped? Would it have made it easier for those workers who, many of them I talked to, said they absolutely wanted to have a union, but they were just getting beaten constantly? Would the PRO Act actually have helped?
Yes, because it would have put significant penalties on employers who were found to have coerced, interfered, or intimidated with workers' ability to make a free choice about whether they wanted to join a union or not in a secret ballot election. It will, as you know, Rick, better than most people, there are no significant penalties today under current law that would discourage employers from waging anti-union campaigns. If we can change that and put significant penalties in place, it will back off some of them. And Jeff Bezos, who claims to be this enlightened employer, as you know, at the start of the Christmas shopping season, in the last quarter of 2020, he made a big deal about raising the starting wage to $15 an hour And yet, the productivity piece count work that they impose on the workers, pushing them, you got to do more, you got to do more. Why do you have to go to the bathroom? Those kinds of things are reminiscent of the sweatshops in the early 20th century. So that's why this election is so important, because if we can organize Amazon, then Walmart will be the next target to do it. These big employers who have been hiding behind the court decisions and weak labor laws won't be able to get away with it any longer.
Yeah, and then the next fight in that, and especially with Amazon, is this fight against employee misclassification as they're moving more and more towards this independent contractor model, and which I think is extremely dangerous. And I'm hoping that we address this in the coming years.
Yes, and as you know, Rick, the Teamsters have been the leader against the misclassification con game, particularly with the port drivers in all of the major ports in the United States. We've been waging a battle with some success in California in getting misclassification rectified by the legislature. And there have been some early court decisions agreeing with our approach. But it has to be done nationwide, because look at the efforts around Uber and Lyft. They spent millions and millions of dollars fighting back the classification of their drivers as employees in California. So even though we're on the right side of the angels on this issue, we're up against some very powerful financial interest with deep pockets.
No, at some point we got to fight back at this, and I'm glad to see that the PRO Act is going to come up on. I think they're talking about Wednesday or Thursday. This is a conversation I think as a country we have to have, and I'm glad that Joe Biden is in the White House to help us lead this conversation. But John, I appreciate your time, your thoughts. Always good talking with you, my friend. Have a great night.
Well, thank you, Rick. Hope to see you soon.
Good stuff. John Murphy, International Vice President at Large with the Teamsters Union. This, again, I go back to this, this reality that we most certainly need to have major labor law reform in this country, and we need to do it soon. And the PRO Act is part of that. I'm a big supporter of going back and undoing Taft-Hartley and all the horrible things that came with that. But the PRO Act would be a step in the right direction. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1924. That was the day that tragedy struck at the Utah Fuel Company mine in Castle Gate, Utah. The mine stood about 90 miles southeast of Salt Lake City. Coal mining began at Castle Gate in 1888. On the fateful day of the explosion, at 8 in the morning, 2 violent blasts ripped through the number 2 mine. 20 minutes later, a third explosion went off. According to an investigation by the Bureau of Mines, the explosions inside the mine were extremely violent and reached all parts of the mine. 171 miners were killed instantly. Those who died reflected the diversity of those who worked in the mines. There were 49 Greeks, 22 Italians, 8 Japanese, 7 English, 6 Australian, 2 Scotch, 1 Belgian, and 76 Americans, including 2 African Americans. They left behind a combined total of 241 children and 25 pregnant wives. Rescue efforts were impeded by the poisonous gases and fire raging in the mine. Rescuers donned helmets to attempt to reach those below. One rescue leader, George Wilson, died from the carbon monoxide when his nosepiece separated from his helmet. It's believed the explosion occurred when one of the bosses attempted to relight the flame on his headlamp. At the time, he was investigating a pocket of built-up gas in the mine. The flame ignited the gas and built up coal dust. The previous shift had kicked up the dust, and it had not been adequately watered down. This contributed to the explosions. It took 9 days to recover all of the bodies of those who died. The families of those killed were provided about $64 a month by the company and the state of Utah for several years after the tragedy. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So some good news coming out of the Department of the Interior. Looks like they've completed one of their environmental reviews. And I guess this is one of the key steps to getting moving on this offshore wind program called Vineyard Wind. 800 megawatt project off of Martha's Vineyard, I guess is where this is at. And look, these are the things that we need if we're going to get off the dirty stuff. The rest of the world way ahead of us. So if we can get this moving, good idea. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on how we change the world, how we save our climate, how we leave something for our children in the future. I've asked Mike Williams to come talk with us. Mike is the Deputy Director of the Blue Green Alliance. Mike, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. I appreciate it. It's a lofty introduction. I hope I live up to it.
So let's start with the wind project here. This is, to steal a Joe Biden frame, a BFD.
It is a BFD. It's pretty interesting, Rick. If I could boil it down in terms of just straight up jobs, let's set aside the clean energy portion. When the Block Island project, which is the only offshore wind project we have operating, when that was built, and there's only 5 turbines. When that was built, it hired over 300 people, and it was nearly all union members. 300 people, 5 turbines. This thing is way bigger, Vineyard Wind, way bigger, many magnitudes bigger. So we're looking at pretty massive job creation coming out of this. And we've been working quite hard to make sure that this one is also union built. We have some good signs that hopefully a project labor agreement can be signed to make sure that the building and construction trades in Massachusetts are the ones that are building that project, and that the operation and maintenance is going to be union as well. But it's all good stuff, Rick. And there's an interesting story about this too. In the previous administration, I don't know if you ever talked about that administration, Rick.
Once or twice.
They made a big thing about how, environmental review, it's the worst thing ever. We're not going to do environmental review on anything, especially oil and gas. Yeah, well, what's the one project they decided to do environmental review on? You guessed it. Offshore wind. Yep. They decided they want to do extra review on it. And so it's great to see the Biden administration moving forward properly, doing proper environmental review, which we need to do,
right?
But getting it done quickly, efficiently, so this thing can be built, so we can get some clean power on our grid and putting people to work.
Yeah, I understand. If I listen to Trump right, if I remember, the former president's statements, it kills all the birds, and it causes cancer, and it's ugly. Those were his reasons why he was against it.
Many people are saying, Rick, many people are no longer saying, because nobody cares what that guy thinks anymore.
There you go. Now, your organization is a marriage between labor organizations and environmental groups, which I think is the perfect kind of marriage. We need to change the direction we're going in this country and rebuild our economy in great ways. So to have groups come together and figure out solutions to problems as opposed to just bombing each other, I think is a good thing. I understand the latest person to join on to the Blue Green Alliance is the Painters Union, the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. I'm curious, how painters can affect the climate and all of this. Is there, because I saw that, I'm going, is there a way of painting something that would make the climate better? Did I miss this?
Well,
how is that?
I'm going to start with the story, and then I'll give you some concrete examples. But so we did some work trying to spread the word, be evangelists of offshore wind, because of how many jobs it creates and the amount of clean energy we can get on the grid. And so we did a couple tours for union members and union leaders of that Block Island Wind project. And I was on a boat, next to a leader from the painters union. And I looked at him and I said, Scott, what does this have to do with you guys? And he turns to me and he's got a thick Rhode Island accent. He goes, you know how much bleeping paint is on that thing? So it's a story. But honestly, there is a ton of connection with the painters and allied trades. So painting, glazing, coatings that go into energy efficiency retrofits. So when we're doing big changes of our building stock, making things more efficient and cleaner, the painters are right there. It's a big part of it. When it comes to clean energy, they do coatings on potentially on solar panels, definitely on glass windows. They do paintings and coatings on wind turbines. They're there. And they're also there because they're just a great forward-thinking union. I mean, one of the first things we're working together on is a big push to get the PRO Act passed. So working and getting the environmental movement to join forces with the labor movement to say, you know, bigger, stronger labor movement in America is better for the climate. It's better for our environment. It's better for all people. So it was a good match, and we're really excited to have the painters aboard.
Yeah, I'm thrilled. And the reason I was so thrilled to see this is all we've been hearing lately, or at least all I'm getting from people is, you know, Joe Biden's killing union jobs because of this environmental garbage. Yeah, because he shut down the Keystone XL pipeline because I guess they're going to be. I've seen numbers between 2,000 and 11,000. I don't know exactly what the number is, but I've been told numerous times that it's a job killer. And I'm going, no, we can take those people who have really good skills and build these wind turbines.
Yeah, and I don't want to set aside the pipeline jobs. Those are really good jobs. They all happen to be union, most of them. The unions who work in those fields did a great job organizing them. So I don't want to step on that at all. But to your point, there's a lot of work to be done, especially once we think about this next step in hopefully COVID recovery, and that's in a big infrastructure bill. And that's our biggest priority coming forward, is trying to get a massive investment in rebuilding our nation's infrastructure. Wind energy is part of that, but it goes way beyond that, Rick. So fixing all the infrastructure systems that we need to fix: roads, bridges, schools, public buildings, healthcare, hospitals, energy systems, waste systems, water systems, so on and so forth. It is way overdue. And honestly, the amount of jobs that would be created from a significant investment in this would be bigger than we've ever seen before if we do this right. And so, yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. President Biden, he ran on the pipeline, and saying that he wasn't gonna go forward with it, but he also ran on a massive investment in infrastructure, and that's hopefully what we're gonna hear real soon from him, the Build Back Better plan. And we've been working with Congress and are pushing the administration to step on it, to say, let's go. We want to revel in getting the bill passed, the COVID relief bill passed that just happened this week, and the House is going to pass it tomorrow, hopefully, get to the president's desk. But the next step has to come right away. We need a big investment in infrastructure.
No, there's no question. And here's the thing, Mike. We've needed it for a number of years. This isn't new. I mean, we just spent 4 years of every week being infrastructure week and not getting any infrastructure built. I mean, there were always fun, cute little pictures of Trump driving trucks and playing with stuff, but no actual policy to get our roads paved, to increase broadband access. I mean, the American Society of Civil Engineers, they just came out with another report card. What are we at? A D, D plus, D minus? What?
C minus. C minus.
We moved up to a C minus.
We have apparently improved to a C minus, I think, thanks to some states who have been investing in these systems and just needing to fix some things because things were literally falling apart. It's a mess. You're right. You stole my joke, Rick. I was going to say something about 4 years of infrastructure week, and look what we got. We didn't even get a T-shirt out of it. But we need to finally do this investment. Honestly, it goes before that too. President Obama, we wanted a big infrastructure package. It didn't really come to fruition. Yeah. We need it now. President Biden ran on it. We can do big things about this. Honestly, the Blue Green Alliance cares deeply about solving climate change. And one thing we say all the time is that climate change is an infrastructure problem. it's an infrastructure problem because we have pollution that comes from our infrastructure systems, and we can make those systems better, cleaner, more efficient, but we need to invest in them. And guess what happens when you do that, Rick? You create and retain tons of jobs.
Right. That can't be outsourced. And that's one of the important parts of this. But here's the thing. I mean, these are simple solutions to a lot of stuff. And I go back to when my kids were smaller years ago. We've had solar panels on our house for years, and they now go, Dad, why don't all roofs have solar panel? Why doesn't the local mall or the Walmart, why don't they have solar panels there? And that's a good question because kids get it. Their school has a giant solar array, yet there's so many missed opportunities because we don't have visionary leadership. And I'm hoping with an infrastructure bill, we're not going to do something that rebuilds a 1950s infrastructure, that we're going to actually look forward to the 21st century.
Oh, we have no choice. We have no choice, Rick. If we try to do that, one, we'll be wasting our time and money. Two, we'll be setting ourselves up to be behind competitively from our global competitors. We need to invest in infrastructure also to save American manufacturing. We need to do this so that we can have cutting edge, innovative manufacturing, whether we need to try to get advanced battery manufacturing in the country. We need to make sure to upgrade our steel mills, our cement kilns, and to make them consistently better. And so, yeah, you're exactly right. This is exactly what this country needs at this moment. And it's what we need, not just for our economy to try to tamp down on economic inequality, but also to take on the climate crisis.
Now, wasn't it GM who just recently came out and said, I think within a couple of years, they're going to move to all electric vehicles?
All electric. Yep.
And for
and
me,
those can
again,
all be built here.
Yeah, and this is fabulous. I'm thrilled to hear it. But here's the problem. It's an infrastructure problem to move to them because where are you going to recharge? We still have an entire infrastructure built around, pulling up to the gas station and sticking that nozzle in your tank.
That's right. You're exactly right. So I drive a Chevy Bolt, Rick. So a union-made electric car, and I had to do a 2.5-hour drive to and fro about a year ago. This is before COVID, so it was like the before times, back when you'd go to meetings. I was actually going to a meeting about offshore wind with the ironworkers, and I took my Bolt, and on the way back, I had to stop somewhere because we didn't have the infrastructure. There wasn't a proper charging station on the highway, right off the highway. Thankfully, my state is investing in that, and that has now been rectified. So if I went now, I easily could have popped off, charged, and gotten back on. But we need way more of that across the country.
No, I mean, we need to have it much more accessible and everywhere. I mean, just like your local gas station, there's got to be a charging station if we're going to move to that, because we're not going to get away from cars. As much as I'm a big supporter of public transit, as much as I love trains, I don't know that Americans are going to give up their cars.
We need all of it, honestly, Rick. I mean, we're a huge country. I mean, we need all of it. In the big urban areas, we need really good, high quality public transit, something that hasn't, honestly, again, been invested in at a major scale that needs to be. We need small public transit in smaller areas, even rural areas, buses and such. You look at the state of Vermont, they actually do a great job investing in public transportation, rural little Vermont. They got these little buses that go everywhere. But even with that, yes, we do need cars. Americans need to get around. We're a big rural country in a lot of places. So it's exactly right. And we need the infrastructure to be able to do this right. And we can do it right.
Yeah, let me ask you kind of the last area I want to get into, because, all this stuff comes back down to the politics. And I know you guys are not a political organization, but at the end of the day, this comes down to what can get passed. Politics is all about what's possible. I look at the PRO Act and I say the labor movement desperately needs to reform, 70 years of ossificated labor law that swung the pendulum of power to the employers and away from workers. We need visionary infrastructure, but yet we've got an antiquated Senate who seems to be hell-bent on getting nothing done. How do you see this going forward with the needs we have as a country and as a globe with a system like we have in the Senate?
Yeah, I'd add one more on that, Rick, too, is our democracy. Our democracy is in peril. I don't know if you saw the state of Georgia decided to roll back voting rights basically today. They took away no excuse absentee. It's terrible. So the other piece of that is we need democracy reforms. And you're right. The Senate is a blockade. And you're right, BGA, we're a non-partisan organization, although we did endorse a candidate for the first time in our history last year, which happened to be Joe Biden. But to your question, I think going forward, what we need to do is continue to press these issues forward, take it to our senators, and so they see that this has to happen, and hopefully we can make way with some reasonable folks across both aisles. And if not, honestly, they heard some interesting things from Senator Manchin, the king of the Senate, this weekend. I don't know if you heard those too, right?
I did.
But basically him saying that, he doesn't want to eliminate the filibuster, but maybe there should be some pain involved to make it back to a talking filibuster.
That's what I said from the beginning. I said, if you want to filibuster, you take yourself onto the floor and you hold the floor. If it's that important, nothing moves until you're done talking. This idea that we can just stop things and nobody know who or how or why is ridiculous.
It's terrible. It's terrible. And it's something, and it has stopped progress for decades because of that. And so it's time that we stop stopping progress and actually put forward a Senate that it admits that we're a democracy and allows for democratic progress to happen. And so it's something where I think, if these issues come to the floor of the Senate, we're going to have to fight it out. And then hopefully, hey, you know what, Rick? I'll be an eternal optimist here. Hopefully 10 Republicans decide that, labor law reform does need to be changed. We do need a $4 trillion investment in infrastructure. We do need to deal with the climate crisis. And you know what? We do need to fix our democracy and get people more voting rights and more voting access. I hope that happens. But guess what? It's the Senate, and they'll probably disappoint us. So I hope that we keep that option in mind and make it so it's a painful filibuster rather than just a...
No, I'm right there with you. Because here's the thing. I mean, infrastructure used to be one of those things that was nonpartisan. You went in, you got your projects to take back to your district, and everybody was happy. You divvied it up. Everybody got something for ribbon cuttings, and hey, look what I brought home. No Republican voted to give money away. I don't know what other bill would ever pass if giving money away doesn't.
Yeah. I was floored that no Republican voted for that relief bill. Floored. It's such a show. I'm trying to use not inappropriate words, Rick, because it was insane that no Republican voted for that bill. People are hurting. People have been screwed through no fault of their own, and Congress and the president finally stood up and finally put forward something that's actually going to fix some things and help people out. And they had the gall to play games with it and say no. And I'm so glad we were able to hammer it through.
It was a big win, and you take the win when you get it. But Mike, I appreciate the time and the thoughts. Keep up the great work there at the Blue Green Alliance. I hope people check out the website, bluegreenalliance.org. We'll get links out on social media. Mike Williams, appreciate the time.
Thank you, Rick.
Good stuff. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. You may know that March is Women's History Month. But did you know why it takes place each year in the month of March? It all goes back to today in labor history. The year was 1857. That was the day that hundreds of women working in New York City's garment industry went on strike. The women demanded better wages, safer working conditions, a 10-hour workday, and equal rights. In the years that followed the historic strike, March 8th became an important time for women workers to rally in the city. So on March 8th, 1908, a crowd of 15,000 women workers in New York took to the streets. The marching women demanded the right to vote, an end to sweatshops, and a halt to child labor. At the International Socialist Congress in 1910, a German woman named Clara Zetkin proposed March 8th be declared as International Women's Day. Women from 17 countries agreed. And over the years, the day continued to hold a special place for women in the labor movement. Women from Bangladesh to South Africa to Venezuela have held demonstrations for workers and civil rights on this day. By 1980, President Jimmy Carter declared the week surrounding March 8th Women's History Week. His declaration read in part, "Too often, the women were unsung and sometimes their contributions went unnoticed. But the achievements, leadership, courage, strength, and love of the women who built America was as vital as of the men whose names we know so well." In 1987, the week was expanded and March became known as Women's History Month. And it all started with garment workers who were not afraid to stand up for their rights, leading the way for countless numbers of other women who have bravely followed in their footsteps. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
After looking into one of their main issues, I have to agree with Republicans. Our elections are being rigged. Anyone who takes an honest look can see that the electoral process is being stolen in broad daylight by Republican lawmakers. In state after state, GOP governors and legislators are on a rampage to rig the system so you can't vote. By you, I mean you African Americans, Latinx voters, Asian Americans, indigenous peoples, and practically all other non-white citizens. Also, you seniors, union members, poor people, students, immigrant families, and others with a tendency to vote for Democrats. Fraudulently shouting fraud, GOP officials insist that they must steal your democratic right to vote in order to protect the sanctity of the vote. They're actually confessing their own embarrassing weakness and political ineptitude by admitting we can't win. Their lineup of squirrely, increasingly kooky candidates and their anti-people, corporate-serving agenda have no ability to draw majority support, so their only hope to be elected is to jerry-rig America's democratic process with barriers, locks, bans, etc., to shut millions of citizens out of their polling places. Their 7 million vote defeat in last year's presidential race has spooked the Republican minority into a stampede of voter suppression initiatives this year. The Brennan Center for Justice, which tracks such maneuvers, reports that at least 253 bills have been introduced in 43 states to further obstruct Americans from casting ballots. This is Jim Hightower saying, this is pathetic, disgraceful political thuggery. Not only stealing people's birthright, but stealing democracy from America itself. To help reject their shameful corruption of elections, go to commoncause.org. commoncause.org.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So if you watched the big Meghan Markle thing last night, the one thing that came out of it for me is, as she said, look, when I was a member of a union, they protected me. I had protection from my union, and that's the message for me that comes out of that whole thing that everyone should take from it. And because here's the thing. Workers need some protection. They need someone who's going to stand up for them. I have a friend who's the head of Good Jobs First, Greg Leroy. He loves to say that the economic crimes against workers much worse than your local stick-ups. And he points out the fact that all of the bank robberies, all the gas station holdups, the convenience stores, all of the robberies that the FBI Uniform Crime Report points out, worth about $500 million. The economic crimes against workers, wage theft, misclassification, theft of benefits, that kind of stuff, 100 times worse. Something like $50 billion each and every year. So when I see a story of someone going after those criminals and holding them accountable, we got to get them on the program, which is why I've asked Larry Krasner to come talk with us. He's the Philadelphia District Attorney. They have come out with a great new program, this Worker Protection Unit. In fact, they've just had their first conviction. And here to share some thoughts on this historic moment, I've asked Larry to come talk with us. Larry, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here, Rick. Thank you for having me.
So I look at this number from my good friend Greg Leroy that, the economic crimes against workers are 100 times worse than what you see on the evening news of someone sticking up a gas station or a bank. Yet we don't really ever hear about it.
Well, there's a reason for that, and it's not a good reason, but there is a reason, which is that, first of all, a lot of people who become chief prosecutors are very politically ambitious. And so they're not just thinking about holding that office and enforcing the law. They're thinking about, how do I become a governor? How do I become a senator? And so they often get to be friendly with people who can donate a lot of money. It is difficult to get your campaign money together off of working people. It is easier to get your campaign money together off of donors who can donate the maximum amount. So unfortunately, that personal political ambition tends to hold hands with rich people. And rich people are either themselves bosses or they have bosses beneath them. And so we often see what has happened historically in Philly, which is that if there's criminal activity going on and it is being perpetrated by a boss, they're liable never to be accountable. But if there's less serious criminal activity going on by working people or poor people, they're going to be accountable. At the most basic level, if you walk into a local convenience store and you steal a couple bags of chips, then they catch you, the cops are going to come, they're going to arrest you, you're going to be charged with retail theft. But if you are an employer, and I'm referring now to the case that we're prosecuting in Philly, if you're an employer who walks off with $110,000 that belongs to your employees, and then you say, oh, sorry, we went bankrupt, I ran out of money, you often do it with the expectation there's no criminal consequence. That is a, quote, civil matter, unquote. Well, no, it isn't. If stealing 2 bags of chips is a crime, then stealing $110,000 from a bunch of your workers that was supposed to go back to their union, that was for your benefits, that's a crime too.
No, absolutely.
And so, we were very proud this year to found a unit that is specifically for the purpose of prosecuting crimes committed against workers, all workers. In this case, these are union workers. We put in charge of it a woman who had been not only studying labor in college and so on, but she had been a labor attorney for many years. And we turned her into a prosecutor, thank goodness. Super talented person. She knew the right people. She understood the issues, things like misclassification of wages, human trafficking, this kind of stuff where you're just flat out stealing from your employees. And we brought a 37-count indictment with felony charges that totaled up to, for stealing basically, it totaled up to $110,000 of theft. And, it's not enough to say I went bankrupt, so sorry, I stole from all my workers. I took their time, I took their benefits. It's just not enough.
Right.
It's something we would love to see a lot of other prosecutors do around the country.
No, I'm right there with you. But, you look at the fact that, as you pointed out, this contractor, basically shorted the plumber's local 690 in Philadelphia of $110,000 in benefit payments, and then just went, oops, never mind. And look, the union, I'm sure, was dogged in pursuing this. And look, I'm sure, had a lot to bend your ear about as well. I often worry about those workers who work for companies like this, who don't have a union, who just, there's nobody fighting for them.
Well, I do too, and there are some things that exist in the civil context, which are positive. There are certain laws that provide for triple damages when you steal people's vacation time or you steal their wages. And that is the appropriate tool in some cases. I know an attorney who actually does pretty well. That's his entire practice, is getting employers who steal your vacation time or who steal your pay, things of that sort. But it's just not enough in certain circumstances. There has to be a bigger hammer in certain circumstances. Otherwise, when you have an entity or a person motivated by profit, even if it's treble damages or you get 3 times the damages when you get caught, well, if you can get away with it most of the time, it still may be the right economic decision.
Yep.
It's just not okay to rip people off for their work, especially in a country where the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. The middle class has been squeezed forever. It's just not okay. And you're right. It's easier when unions are involved because they see the problem coming. They gather the information. They can bring a package to a prosecutor and say, look at what they're doing to our people. But we are every bit as excited about protecting any worker. unionized or not. And we certainly hope that they will come forward in our jurisdiction. I hope they'll come forward in all jurisdictions. I hope they'll come forward in campaigns and say the prosecutor I want, the chief prosecutor I want, is somebody who is going to look out for workers, because that is not the history of what's happened with American prosecution.
No, and it's something that we absolutely have to do. And if folks want to get in touch with your office, there is a phone number, 215-686-9902. We'll get that out on social media so people can take a look at it, or email at fraudcomplaint@phila.gov. That's PHILA.gov. We'll get that out as well. But, here's the thing. I mean, you look at the numbers that are out there, and as my friend Greg Leroy likes to point out, the fact that wage theft is so rampant and this economic theft is so rampant, much worse than the guy sticking up the gas station or the bank. And it's taken this long for someone like you to go, we should be putting these people in jail. I think speaks a lot about the past and what people have gotten away with and why it's so bad.
Well, I don't want to pretend we're the first and only ones to do this, because we're not. There have been some pretty forward-thinking prosecutors around, including, for example, Morganelli in, I think it's Northampton Township, or Northampton County,
right,
Pennsylvania. And there have been a few others around the country, but this is really the way it should be. I mean, you're supposed to be even-handed. You're supposed to treat famous people and unfamous people the same way, broken rich the same way. And this is really how it should be. We shouldn't be so excited about locking up homeless people for stealing food and have no excitement about locking up people driving, Range Rovers who are using bankruptcy law to get out of the fact that they ripped off a whole bunch of people. Let me put this plug in, though, for people who may contact our office. The attorney who is in charge of the unit in our office is a woman named Danielle Newsome, Newsome, I think. Well, maybe I'm messing it up. Danielle with an E. But she's great. And, before she really got rolling, she made some calls around the country to study some best practices around the country. If there is a prosecutor's office that wants to get at this, or maybe a candidate who's running for a chief prosecutor with an agenda that speaks to reform, who wants to hear about it, we'd be more than happy to pass along some of the things that she's learned, not only in her career as a labor attorney, but in her studies of best practices in other offices, because this really is how it should be across the country.
No, I absolutely agree. And it's one of these moments where you go, there need to be real penalties for these crimes, and not just, as you pointed out, a slap on the wrist, triple the penalties, but still, you get away with it often enough. That's just a slap on the wrist. And I take this as well to the point to where I think we should be holding employers accountable for unsafe work acts as well. I mean, you look at the story that just came out today, 1,000 deaths from COVID that went uninvestigated and nobody knows anything about. And this is one of those things that infuriates me, is that so much of what happens in this country to workers just gets swept under the rug or forgotten about. And I would like to see those 1,000 deaths avenged at some point.
I hear that. It's there have been some famous examples of what I consider to be criminal acts perpetrated by employers. For example, having employees moving 55-gallon drums full of toxic materials with no protection after you've painted over the skull and crossbones that are on the can, having outrageously unsafe work conditions that violate OSHA and on a construction site, so that you have a group of people who are killed when scaffolding falls. This is a little bit like talking about traffic accidents. There are some traffic accidents that are mistakes. Even if people die, they're not criminal acts.
Right.
But there are also some traffic accidents where the speed limit is 35 and you decided to go 100. And that's a crime. It's a whole different thing. So we should not assume that a loss of life of an employee on a work site. I mean, we had a famous case in Philly where there was a terrible result. It's called the Salvation Army case, but a number of people were crushed when a building caved in. It had a lot to do with improper demolition going on next door. And needless to say, the only guy who got charged criminally, this is a prior administration, is the crane operator, right? Never mind, the architect. Never mind the people who filled out all the paperwork and were well aware of the shortcuts that were being taken by this crane operator. This is a typical scenario where there's plenty of blame to go around, but it's all going to fall on the one who is on the front line, and none of it's going to fall on the people who designed the situation, chose to cut corners to save money by doing things a certain way, and cause deaths. We have to be willing to hold people responsible for what they do, and not just the broke ones, and not just the ones who don't have power to fight back, but everybody in an even-handed way.
No, I'm right there with you, and I'm looking at this moment. Joe Biden came out the other day with a statement on, the National Labor Relations Act is to encourage people to join and form unions. The president supports that. I'm hoping that there's this new move towards protecting workers, towards holding employers accountable, because for the last 40 plus years, at least in my working lifespan, it's all been attack, and workers absorbing. I'm hoping at some point that there's someone who's going to level that playing field and hold others accountable, so that we're not left holding the bag all the time.
I'm with you 100%. I think to the extent that the people's voice is heard, and I don't just mean unions, but I mean unions and also other people who are just working people. And they say, here's the news, we're voting, but we're voting for prosecutors and police who are going to treat us as well as they treat the people who employ us and the people who invest in the companies that our employers work for. When you get to that point, democracy really starts to work. It hasn't been working as well for us for quite some time as it might. I'm certainly happy with the last presidential campaign, the last presidential outcome for sure. But it just hasn't been working as well. And I think part of the problem we have is that people don't always realize how much power they have. When Stacey Abrams was able to achieve that incredible result in Georgia by really turning out tons of votes with efforts that went back years in building that groundwork, she set a standard. And the standard is labor can not only do well, it can have a tremendous comeback in terms of union organizing and so on. But you're going to have to register a lot of votes, and you're going to have to take back some of these gerrymandered seats for us to get there.
No, I mean, there's a lot of work to be done, but for me, it's about grabbing the reins and empowering working people to step forward and not no longer be the ones absorbing all of these hits. And I'm hoping what you're doing catches on. I'm hoping district attorneys across the state and across the country take on to this and say that we're not going to let this continue to happen in our districts, because sadly, it happens all across this country. There are cases everywhere. And to have someone who's looking out for working people like you, I say good on you.
Well, I appreciate that. I think you're kind of looking out for working people too. So there we go. But nobody more than Danielle Newsom, and anybody who really wants, the key to unlock this, get with Danielle, and I'm sure that she will be more than happy to share whatever we can share.
And we'll make sure we get links out on social media, and so people can take a look at that. Last question I've got for you. As district attorney, I had a bunch of people go, "You're going to interview Larry Krasner?" I go, "Yeah." Is he going to do anything to Trump? I had to throw a Trump question there for some listeners. Do you see anything happening with Donald Trump?
Well, let me just say that if Donald Trump wants to commit a crime in Philadelphia, then there will be a consequence for him, just like there would for anyone else.
There you go.
Do I see something coming for Donald Trump? Yes. I think that there's a very significant possibility he's going to face consequences in state court. I'm not so sure he'll ever face them in federal court, since the man has basically been a liar, a cheat, and a thief his whole life. He has a few problems, and it's not just with taxes. So I think he is going to face consequences somewhere. I think the jury that he faces may not look 100% like his voters, and that's a good thing. It's time for him to be accountable like anybody else.
There you go. Larry, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you, Rick. It's a pleasure.
Good stuff. Larry Krasner, district attorney there in Philadelphia. If you want to check out what they're doing, we'll get links out on social media. If you've got a situation, fraud complaint at phila.gov. That's how you get to that. Or contact Danielle Newsom. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2007. That was the day 7,000 workers at Northrop Grumman, a shipyard company in Pascagoula, Mississippi, went out on strike. Grumman is one of the largest defense contractors in the world. The workers were members of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 733, and the Pascagoula Metal Trades Council. They were still reeling from the ravages of Hurricane Katrina just 2 years earlier. The hurricane had devastated the Mississippi Gulf Coast and sent prices for housing skyrocketing. But while workers suffered, Katrina brought $3 billion in federal contracts to Northrop Grumman to repair hurricane damage. Despite this, Grumman proposed a 4-year contract for the workers with no raises and increased healthcare costs. For many workers, this did not sit well. They knew the company had received massive government contracts, but still was not willing to treat workers fairly at the bargaining table. The union members rejected the offer and voted to strike. The company came back with a proposal offering small raises, which did not keep pace with the cost of living. The strike was called. For 4 weeks, workers marched and manned the picket lines. During the strike, the company cut off the workers' health care coverage. The company then offered slightly higher wages and reduced the increases to health care coverage. Although the proposal was not enough to keep up with the soaring local cost of living, union members voted to end the strike and accept the offer. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I'll tell you, we need more people who are going to go after employers who do bad things. Hold them accountable, and as I've been saying for years, lock them up. Look, finding them is one thing. Putting them in a pinstripe suit behind the bars of the Gray Bar Hotel, that's the way you stop a lot of things. That's the way you get them to think twice, because a couple of bucks, they'll write that off. But sitting behind bars, getting the tin cup, singing "Nobody Knows," that what we need to be doing. I got an email from George, who's very angry. George, very angry. Rick, you shouldn't be so happy about Biden's COVID relief bill. It passed with fewer people eligible for checks. It has less help for the unemployed, and there's no $15 an hour minimum wage. He says the richest people in the country got richer during the pandemic, while Congress slashed help for the rest of us. Major fail, he says. This is one of those moments where you go, politics is the art of the possible. This was the deal they could get. Would I have liked to have seen a $15 an hour minimum wage in there? Yes. Would I have liked to see residual checks to go on for a couple of months? Yes. Would I like to see a lot of things in that? Absolutely. Wasn't going to happen. And I'm sorry about that. That's just the reality. You can be mad at me for pointing out what is the reality, or you can take it as what it is. You had a number of centrist Democrats who, they didn't want to spend it. Joe Manchin being, the big one, the one who did the dipsy-do with the thumbs down on the minimum wage. She's another one. You got the two from New Hampshire. They just weren't coming along. Would I have liked to have seen a much more robust plan? Yeah, absolutely. But you got the best deal, and here's the reality. You got the best deal you were going to get. And here's the reality. This is a win. Learn to take a win. This is one of those moments where you go, yep, wasn't everything we wanted. Learn to take the win. We got a lot of things. And it wasn't the $2,000 that it wasn't that we were promised. It was $1,400 plus the $600 that Trump gave us, even though that's $2,000. I think everyone knows that in simple math. Still, it was more than I thought we were going to get, to be quite honest. So take the win. Take the win. I got this really funny email today from my uncle. My uncle is a very well-to-do guy, crazy a little bit, huge Trump supporter. He sent me this, this really nice kind of chain email. Yeah, he's on that level of sophistication at this moment. It's the still doing the chain email stuff, because he doesn't do Twitter or Facebook or any of that stuff. It's email is right there. He's 80 some years old. So he sends me this thing about how things were in 1955, how wonderful life was in 1955. About I never imagined that stamps should be 7 cents to mail a letter. Nobody can hire anybody if they raise the minimum wage to $1. He said, gas was $0.25 a gallon. Who could possibly drive their car with gas going up to $0.25 a gallon? Just a whole bunch of, this old school, when I was a kid, you could go to the movies for a nickel. That kind of stuff. So I went through and and I looked at this stuff and I said, the reality is you go back to that era, and while you were paying a nickel for something, it was almost comparable to the prices that we're paying now. We're just using more dollars. Like that $1 an hour minimum wage in 1955 would have been $9.80 today, where it's only $7.25 now. The gas prices that he was worried about, at $0.25, we're right in line with where they are right now. To mail a letter for 7 cents back then, would have been 69 cents in today's dollars. So, I went through this and I'm looking at all this stuff and I'm going, the idea that and we tell ourselves that life was so much better back in the old days, and I would argue to him that the reason things were better is because people had more money. The working class of this country could get by on a single income and do it fairly well, and that came to the fact because you had very strong labor unions and you had a really high tax rate. One of the things in this spiel that he has is, can you imagine the government taking half of your income in taxes? And this is the one that kind of sent me off. And the reason that I brought this up, because, I had to write back to him and I said, look, you lived through this era where the top marginal tax rate in 1955 was 92%. Now, I understand you're in the 37% tax rate now because you're at the top. You're one of the 1%. I get that. And then I know back in 1955, you were not. But had you been back in 1955, you would have paid 92% tax on that dollar over, I think in today's dollars, it'd be like $1.6 million. And the reason that we were able to have all of the stamps were cheaper and all this stuff was cheaper is because the government was heavily subsidizing this stuff. They were building roads. They were investing in education. You could literally go to a college, and a good college, for what is, not a horrible price. So for a moment, I said, well, let me go back and look at what tuition costs would be in 1955. And I looked up an Ivy League school like Penn. University of Pennsylvania, in 1955, their stated tuition, fees, room and board were $1,820 a year. That's the equivalent of just about $18,000 a year now. If I could send my kids to Penn for $18,000 a year, if you could send, anyone could send their kids, there'd be nobody allowed. There'd be no room. They'd have to build 2 Penns. Because right now in 2021, the tuition, room and board to go to Penn now is over $60,000. And why is that? Well, it's simple. We heavily subsidized. We gave heavy subsidies to these universities. And we forget about that. Because remember, back in the old days, 1955, where my uncle directed me, the corporate tax rate was 52%. It's 21% now. That top marginal rate, 92%, 37% now. We've taken what built the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization, and we've taken all of the resources out of it, and now we're living on debt and poverty wages. And the wealth class of this country is thrilled to do it. They're thrilled to have you take out credit cards so that you can pay 29% interest on a bag of Cheetos. It is insane. And for me, we can do nothing unless we deal with our tax code. We can do nothing unless we move on taxing the people who did really well during this pandemic. So to my uncle, I hope he reads that, and I hope it sinks into that Trump skull. I'm not going to say he's a numbskull, but he's a Trump skull. So there you go. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Bob Ney is going to be here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. Stick around.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
This is happening much sooner rather than happening later this century. We're seeing it decades ahead of schedule.
The Gulf Stream is the weakest it's been in 1,000 years, and climate change is likely to blame. The COVID carbon rebound begins as global emissions rise, plus...
The Swedish brand says it's convinced no one will want a petrol engine by the end of the decade.
Volvo is the latest car maker to go all electric.
And they're going fast. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Now, going electric is an expensive process for car makers, which have to totally rethink design and production.
Oh, really? You mean they can't just rethink where they're going to put new cup holders? Sad. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, there has been one and only one nice thing about COVID. The pollution has been way down, but now you say carbon emissions are on the way up?
Oh, yes. Now, 2020 marked the largest decline in global CO2 emissions in history, about 11% due to the coronavirus pandemic shutdowns slashing fossil fuel consumption. However, this week, the International Energy Agency warned that greenhouse gas emissions are already rebounding as economies slowly reopen. Now, this was predicted. China, India, and the United States remain top emitters, and the data shows that the U.S. still has the highest emissions per person by far. U.S. per capita emissions are twice that of folks in Germany and China, and 10 times higher per capita than India.
Even during the COVID crisis.
Yes.
Why am I not surprised?
The United Nations warned in a recent report that countries' pledges to cut their greenhouse gas emissions under the Paris Climate Agreement are far too low. Current pledges would deliver only a 1% reduction in global emissions by 2030, rather than the 45% reduction that scientists say is needed by 2030 to have a good shot at averting climate catastrophe. The Biden administration announced it will raise the U.S. climate emissions targets under the Paris Agreement. That's in advance of a virtual global summit with world leaders on Earth Day, April 22nd. Canada announced it will join the United States in increasing its own emissions targets.
Nice.
And it matters because new data indicates that the Gulf Stream in the Atlantic is now the weakest that it's been in 1,000 years, slowing down much earlier than previously projected. Man-made climate change is likely to blame. The Gulf Stream acts like a conveyor belt that transports warm water from the tropics north along the east coast and onto Europe, giving Europe its mild climate. A slowdown of the Gulf Stream would bring more severe heat waves and storms to Europe and the U.S., accelerate sea level rise in North America, and impact marine ecosystems and the ocean food supply. In an interview with the Green News Report, climate scientist Dr. Michael Mann explained.
this is happening much sooner rather than happening later this century. We're already seeing a substantial weakening of this current system that is unprecedented in 1,000 years. We're seeing it decades ahead of schedule. And that is likely because the Greenland ice sheet is beginning to disintegrate earlier than we expected, so that fresh water is running off into the North Atlantic earlier than expected, and that puts a cap on top of the ocean, which inhibits the sinking motion that drives that so-called conveyor belt. It's a reminder that uncertainty isn't our friend. In many respects, the impacts of climate change are now playing out sooner than we expected.
Oh, great.
Scientists warn that if governments fail to cut emissions, the Gulf Stream circulation may slow down by as much as 45% by the end of the century, which risks triggering extremely dangerous planetary tipping points. Scientists didn't expect this to happen until the end of the century. It's now happening decades earlier. But there is some good news.
Good.
At a virtual annual energy conference this week, Shell Oil CEO Ben Van Beerden said Shell Oil's production peaked in 2019, and they're diversifying into clean energy to meet Europe's target of net zero emissions by 2050.
Net zero is both, I think, a societal imperative. Therefore, you could argue a moral imperative for a company that wants to be on the right side of history. And it's an amazing business opportunity then.
Well, it's about time they get on the right side of history. Just a few decades late, but I'll take it.
Finally, Swedish carmaker Volvo is the latest carmaker to abandon fossil fuels, announcing it is ending production of all gasoline vehicles by 2030. By 2025, half of its sales will be electric cars and the other half hybrids, and it will sell only electric cars by 2030, much faster than other car makers. It also means Volvo will stop selling gasoline-only vehicles just 4 years from now.
I love it. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So evidently the Republican National Committee, they're defending their right to use Donald Trump's name, which has got to just send him crazy because he's always been so judicious in how he uses his name. Like slapping it on failed vodka and steaks and universities and casinos. But he's been always the one benefiting from it. The RNC wants to use his name because they want to raise money. I found it interesting during his little CPAC thing. He didn't say send the RNC money, send him money. So interesting stuff. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, our good friend Bob Ney, former congressman, political analyst, and all-around brilliant guy. Bob, thanks for taking time for us. I think I lost Bob. Nope, there he is. He didn't hang up on me, did he?
I'm there. No, I'm here.
That's what happens
I'm not disagreeing with anything you just talked about. So.
I thought, uh-oh, he's hung up on me. That's it.
No.
Afraid Donald Trump's going to sue him for using his name.
Maybe.
So what do you think? I mean, this is kind of is this nonsense or is this, you think, a serious thing?
No, I mean, it's nonsense. Look, anytime an organization would say something illegal or disparaging and use a name, you'll have people that will say cease and desist. But the use of public figures, for example, the Republican National Committee, as the Democrat National Committee, will utilize, the DNC will utilize Trump's name, the RNC will utilize Hillary's name, to raise money. Hillary's going to get you or Trump's going to get you. I mean, both parties do it, have done it, forever. Now, if they say something that is, bordering on illegal, then any of the candidates can go after them. But under free speech, they use it. They use the names.
Yeah.
Now, I think he probably, honestly, in what he's doing with lawyers, Rick, is probably looking to cut a deal where he gets a certain amount of the revenue, and then they keep using his name. That's probably what he's looking to do.
I guarantee he's trying to cash in off of it.
Right. Exactly.
And can you do that?
Well, they could. I mean, they can donate a certain portion to the Trump political campaign. Here's one thing, and any listener that hasn't heard this yet might be shocked, but you can use your political campaign funds, any PAC funds, to further your political career.
Right.
You know, I can actually create a fund now and say I'm going to further some political career I'm going to have, and I could use those funds. So anybody that can raise them can use them for the furtherance, quote, of their political career. And so the RNC could pass funds over to his account because he has a, quote, political account.
So what did the witch get in trouble for? What was her name?
There's been so many.
No, she said she was a witch. Christine O'Donnell.
Oh, okay.
From Delaware. No, I think she said she was a witch.
Oh, she said she was a witch. Okay.
She got into some trouble because she was raising money to further her political career, but she was paying rent and buying groceries with it. Can you do that?
No, you can't do that. Now, I know who you're talking about. She was in the Tea Party movement in 2009 or so or something.
She got into trouble using money. I'm not sure exactly how it was, but I know she got into some trouble, and I'm like, but she can spend money.
She ran against Biden, in fact.
Yeah.
She? Yeah. Well, now if you use there's another fine line though. If right now you've got somebody that's leaving, Rob Portman of Ohio. Let's pick him. And he leaves, he has a campaign account, and he keeps the campaign account. Now, it used to be, prior to 1994, you could pay taxes and keep that money for your own personal use. We banned that practice. That got banned. I wasn't there. But right before I came in, it got banned. But that's what you used to be able to do.
Wow.
Have $1 million, you pay taxes on it, and keep it. That stopped. But let's say Rob Portman leaves office and he decides that he has to have correspondence and he needs to go say hi to Lincoln Day dinners, and so he leases a car and he has a driver and he pays that out of there, and he has a secretary and he pays that out of there, and he wants to get me and you down to Cincinnati to talk about politics, and he pays our way and buys us dinner. Yes, you can do all of that.
Wow.
Now, if he wants to pay a part of a office fee that's used in his home, he could do that. But to use it for other, personal benefits, you're not allowed. But again, that personal benefit line can be pretty foggy.
Yeah, got it. There you go. So we'll see how this plays out. Did you happen to see the big Oprah thing last night?
I watched part of the after clips, and I put a meme up.
I saw it.
Well, I took it down because friends were like, "You're going to go to Facebook jail for that." I thought it was funny. I'm sorry, but I did.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you go, I don't really care. And look, I don't want to step on anybody's mental health issues. And if people are suicidal, I hope they get the help that they need and all of that stuff. I want to be, but I got to be honest. When you're at that level, I'm sorry, I don't have that much sympathy for you.
Right. The meme was, that she paid all that money. The Queen paid all that money for his wedding, and now she's hunting down the wife. I'm not so sure about all the mental health part. I found it interesting what they were saying about someone or some people within the royal family. I found that very interesting.
Yeah, I mean it's like Trump's many people.
Mm-hmm. But as far as extreme damage because somebody said that to her, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, but this is the weird thing. I mean, I turned it off because I'm going.
Family says insulting things too. They do.
No, people say insulting things all the time, and I keep falling back on this. When did we become this kind of society that loves misery porn, that loves this kind of outrage? Because I knew before the interview even started, I knew what it was going to be. It was going to be someone made a comment about race in the royal family, and it was, because I'm sure they did. I'm sure that happened numerous times.
Right.
I'm sure not to her, but I'm sure it happened numerous times. So there's no surprise. Is it right? Absolutely not. Mm-hmm. But could you go into that expecting it? Yeah, I think you should have.
Right, and like I said, can't you think of family events over the last 15 years where one of the relatives said, what? During Thanksgiving or Christmas?
Exactly. In my family, and I'm not even talking, no, we're way down definitely not the royal of the prim and proper folks. I'll tell you the one thing that was interesting to me was the fact that Oprah asked the question, did you read anything? Did you prepare at all for the job that was coming? And she said no. And I'm going, well, how do you not? How do you not go into a position where people who have been groomed their whole life to be in that spot, and you didn't read one article? I just found it interesting.
I mean, if they don't like it, then get out and you lead a different life.
Yep, and good on them. I'm glad they're happy. I'm glad they've moved on. There you go. That's where it ends for me. Although I got to tell you, her comment about the unions made me very happy. In her last job, she said she had a union, and the union protected her.
Okay.
Something positive came out of me watching this for an hour.
Okay.
So good on her for that. Let's move along. Vaccine passports.
Yes.
Are we getting vaccine passports?
I think eventually at least for flight, my neighbor actually tonight almost cried. She said, "You've got to be kidding me," because I've been telling her about this, about the vaccine passports. They've got a couple of apps where you take, if you get your shot, I've got my shot, my second one comes Monday, and you get your paper copy and you get this app and it's downloaded, not your copy, but it's downloaded by, I think, the CDC. I've got to check it out. And then you've got it on your cell phone. And I know that some of the airlines are absolutely starting a vaccine pass. So that's going to happen. Now, that's international. Will it happen domestic? I don't know. I sort of suspect it will, because then the airline will have less immunity, could you say, or less liability, more immunity, less liability, by saying, well, I made them show that before they got on the plane. So I think it's coming. Now, the question about this, Rick, is will it be used for other things? You want to go to the sports event, here, hold your cell phone up. If you got your vaccine pass, your passport.
Yeah, I'm kind of weirded out about that. I'm not a papers, please kind of person. I understand where it's coming from, but I don't know. I'm a little taken back by it.
Well, the paper please is correct. I mean, the late Congressman John Lewis, and I remember, him sharing this story. At one point in time, they couldn't get him off of the no-fly list. Ted Kennedy was on it. I used to fight to get 94-year-old constituents off of the no-fly list. It was how Homeland Security did it. And I remember they turned to John Lewis and said, "Carry papers." And he said, "This is in South Africa. I don't carry papers." I remember that comment, and I'm just wondering, is this going to turn into where, well, where's your passport? You want to get into the 8th grade volleyball game? Let me see your passport.
We already do that. I mean, my kid's school, you have to give them your driver's license.
Well, that's true. I did for my granddaughter. I never thought about that.
No, this is my problem. We're already going to this stuff. You can't get in fact, in Pennsylvania now, I think October, I lost the ability to go into federal buildings because I don't have a real ID, issued driver's license. I was against the Real ID Act from the very beginning. I thought it was a horrible, stupid idea.
Well, I think with this, it's going to be so easy for people to say, there's an app, there's a vaccine app, do you have it? Which then makes it almost where, the vaccine really isn't a choice. No. If you want to practically function, you're going to have it.
No,
I've been talking, you and I talked about this, I think, 2 or 3 months ago about this app coming.
Yeah, that and the fact that employers are now going to start mandating that you get it as well. And look, I'm going to get it. There's no question about it. I think everyone should. But I can hear the squeals already. I can hear the mask burners from Idaho screaming already.
Well, I think the passport is coming, as they call it, vaccine passport.
That's crazy. Did you see the mask burning over the weekend?
No, I must have missed it.
In Idaho, they at the Capitol, they got out some burn barrels and they had kids have this ceremony of burning their mask. Oddly enough, Idaho never had a mask mandate, so it was kind of like, as I said earlier, and I thought it was actually a funny analogy. I said it's kind of like book burners who can't read. This is the same kind of scenario. They had these people who weren't mandated to wear the mask are now ceremoniously burning the ones that they have because they're getting their freedom back.
Well, I mean, Texas is the talk of the town.
Yeah,
obviously.
Yeah. All right, let's talk the big stimulus bill, the American Rescue Plan. Surprised it got through?
No, because you and I had talked about this a week ago. It was going to have to get through. One way or the other, it needed to get through. I don't know if anybody got promised anything. That would not be unnatural in politics. That maybe was hesitant, but it had to pass. Now, I think there's an interesting follow-up on the heels of it by Senator Manchin of West Virginia, who is publicly saying, if you don't include the Republicans in climate change, I'm not going to do it. Basically insinuating, they weren't part of, and he even actually said some of this verbiage that they weren't part of the stimulus plan. So if it comes to transportation and climate change, he wants them to be part of it. So that, again, I mention him because he's key. Obviously, if he rejects doing something and they can't get Republican votes, then they're going to have problems. But I expected that one way or the other the stimulus bill was going to have to be enacted.
No, absolutely. And I had a listener send me an email, complaining that we didn't get the $2,000, the unemployment wasn't extended enough. We didn't get the minimum wage in there. And look, those are shortcomings. And as I said, this is a win. Take a win.
If it had went farther, which the utopia of what somebody might have wanted, which I'm not saying is incorrect, but had it went farther, they might have lost votes, and then there would be nothing.
Right.
So this is a lot of something is better than a whole lot of nothing, and I think it's close enough that the average person will be okay with this. And then we have to see how the economy rolls. How does it pick up? After this, do the vaccinations work? There's going to be a history ahead of this. But it has a child tax credit in it. It has health insurance subsidies that are also in it, and of course the unemployment benefits. They did go. You're right. It was from 400 to 300, right?
Right.
So the House bill would provide 400. Then I had some people today say, well, the House is going to fight it. No, the House is not going to fight it. The House is going to yield to it, because if they fought it, there'd be a conference committee. If there's a conference committee, some really ugly things can happen that would kill the bill.
Yep. And
can't
have that. It's got to be signed on Tuesday.
That's it. That's life in D.C.
It's got to be signed on Tuesday.
And it's a decent bill. It's going to help a lot of people.
No, absolutely. And I've been very positive on it because it's more than I thought that they were going to get.
Right.
It is, politics, the art of the possible. This is what was possible. Take the win, move it forward, and then pick up with Joe Manchin, where I think he left himself some wiggle room this weekend in talking about the filibuster. And it's something that we've talked about, a couple of times. Mm-hmm. It sounds like he's coming around to where my mindset of the filibuster is, and that is, you want a filibuster? Take to the floor.
Yeah, he's talking about what I think Strom Thurmond probably did the last one, unfortunately, on the civil rights bill. But, he spent all his time on the bill. So Manchin's saying, I'm against the filibuster, but if we have it, then take it back to what it really should be, which is you go nonstop. You keep going, talking.
And that's a smart thing. I mean, there are a couple of ways that could go around this to where at the end of the day, debate, do what you got to do. But at the end of the day, you got to have a vote, and we got to get things done.
Right. I mean, personally, I don't like the filibuster. I think it ought to end. But the reality is that Manchin will not yield on this, so they ought to explore what else he's saying about the filibuster.
I'm right there with you. Bob, as always, I appreciate the time. Looking forward to you getting your second shot and being, invincible.
And flyable.
There you go. And flyable.
Thanks.
Good stuff.
Okay.
As always, our good friend Bob Ney. Thanks so much, Bob. No, I mean, look, if Manchin is willing, this is one of those things where I go, if he's willing to talk about moving the filibuster, I think the Democrats have to meet him on this. I, from the very beginning, said not opposed to having the filibuster, but you got to do the work. You got to get your stack of Bibles, get your stack of phone books. I prefer you talk about the topic, but talk until you don't have a voice anymore. Make your argument. That's what the debate period is for. And then you got to have a vote. Debate has to eventually stop. When you have nothing left to say, then we vote on it. This idea of getting to 60 votes, getting to the cloture vote to end debate, getting a super majority is crazy. We need to get things done. And for me, the idea that this week there's a chance that the House, well, there's not a chance. The House is going to pass the PRO Act, the Protect the Right to Organize Act. They're going to pass that. It's a matter of what comes down to the Senate. And I would love to hear the Republicans' reason why they're opposed to people joining and forming unions. I think it would be very enlightening. I would love to have them have to hold the floor and debate why they don't believe that people who vote for them, because look, overwhelmingly, I would say probably at least 30 to 40% of union members vote for Republicans on a regular basis, and maybe half on a semi-regular basis. So these are their voters. I think it would be really educational if they came out and explained their views on labor unions, on union members, because I know a lot of very staunch Republican union members who are good union members. They're the kind of people who you'll get my union card from my cold dead hand. They're that kind of good union member. And they're diehard Republicans. And they don't believe that the Republican Party is going to destroy their union. Even though the last 40 years of proof is right there in front of them, they don't buy it. Now, in their defense, the Democrats haven't been great either. Joe Biden, I think, has. And I'm happy with the fact that he is, in my lifetime, the most pro-labor president to date, because he's actually pushing to get things that will help done. And at some point, we got to be able to get it done. And this is why I'm back to the. If you want to filibuster, do the Strom Thurmond. Because I think he was on the floor like an entire day. I think he went like 24 hours. And that's a long time to talk. Trust me. I do it 2 hours a day. It's hard to do 2 hours a day. Imagine having to stay on topic and I think there should be some kind of no reading the phone book or the Bible or anything nonsensical, but actually staying on topic. Make your argument. I want to hear the debate. I want to hear your stories. I think if we had a system where that came out and the American people saw how flimsy their arguments are, I think they would change. I think we would have a mass renaissance of political thought in this country. Because all we get is about 7 seconds. We get about 7 seconds in messaging. That's it. That's all our brains are wired for. I think they actually have to sit and listen to them make a cogent argument for their position. And then to actually debate and answer and respond, I think it'd be healthy for our democracy. To me, that's the way we reclaim our political system. Make them stand up there and tell you what they think. Because for too long we get the talking points, we get the sound bites. But there's no cross-examination. I get Republicans all the time. Well, I believe in unions, but just not government unions. Oh, so we're going to split the working class into pieces. Is that what you're saying? And the answer is yes. They know divide and conquer. I had talked to Joe Walsh, former Illinois congressman, Tea Party guy, said, I like unions. But, I don't think you should have to join in a workplace. You should be able to pick and choose if you want to. And I've had other people tell me, no, you should have multiple unions, tons of unions. Everybody should have their own union. Knowing that that's a destructive force. Knowing that we're pitting people against each other and ripping the workplace apart. They know that. And I'd love to hear them say it. So that's why I'm in favor of a talking filibuster. I'd love to hear your thoughts, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com is where you go to get the podcast. New updated website. Looks really sharp. You should check it out. Take the program on the go wherever you go with the smartphone app. Get that. And as I said, as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Big week ahead. ProAct on the horizon. Looking forward to that. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do that email thing. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.